The story begins with Prince Christopher annulling his engagement with Silviana Mercolini. However, unlike what he expected, Silviana did not look so upset, angry, or even disappointed. She humbly accepted it because it was the day she could finally be free. Puzzled, Christopher repeated that he was breaking off their engagement, and in response she reiterated that she accepted it. He told her that she would be removed from her position as crown princess and that normally people would resist this. Silviana giggled, stating that she wasn't resisting at all. She had hated the idea of marrying him from the very beginning, so she was actually grateful he was the one to suggest breaking it off. Prince was shocked. Silviana at least wanted to know the reason for this annulment because he deliberately chose the graduation ceremony at St. Aideen Academy to do this. She asked if he had something he wanted to accuse her of publicly. Prince said it was because she bullied Katya. Katya said she hated her while crying. As she expected, there was a false accusation for a crime she knew nothing about. She decided to fight back because she had prepared for this day. She stated that she had no memory of such things because she was quite a busy person and didn't have time for such nonsense. He told her that she tore her textbook, but Silviana responded that as a noble, damaging a textbook that was supplied by the state national property would be unthinkable. And besides, there was no reason for her to do that. Prince believed that she had found Katya annoying and claimed that she pushed her down the stairs a week ago. To show proof, Katya even wrapped her wrist in bandages. She stated that healing magic had taken care of that, and Katya was capable of using recovery magic herself. She also explained that she wasn't even at the academy a week ago, so pushing her would have been impossible. Christopher then asked where she was kipping off to if she wasn't at the academy. She didn't need to lie to these people anymore, so she revealed that she was harvesting radishes in a dungeon. Everyone in the room was shocked and puzzled, especially Christopher. She said that dungeon-grown vegetables were tasty and highly nutritious, and they were even used as ingredients for potions. Prince said that wasn't the point and told her that she was lying because students weren't allowed to enter dungeons outside of class, and she couldn't even get an adventurer's license until graduation. Silviana stated that there were special exceptions and that she had been operating under a false name. Her adventurer's name was Sylvie Linney, and in fact, she was an S-rank adventurer. She wanted everyone to remember that name well. Whenever adventurers entered dungeons, records were kept so she could prove to her alibi that she had no time for such silly villainous behavior. While climbing the stairs, she stated that they were in mutual agreement. So the annulment was official, and that said it would be awkward to remain here at the graduation after this, so she was going to leave. She thanked him for everything, but didn't forget to mention that he never helped her. After saying goodbye to her ex-fiancé, she vanished using a teleportation circle. Prince Christopher was trembling in anger after she humiliated him and proved that he had lied in front of everyone. Meanwhile, Silviana was celebrating that the engagement annulment event was completed. Born into the Mercolini ducal house, she was engaged to that prince for 10 years since age 18, and it had been such a long road until now. She couldn't even believe she endured it all. She was always paired with Christopher, even though she never liked him. At tea parties and social gatherings, even at the academy, she always had to watch her behavior carefully every day. Meanwhile, without a care, Christopher only dotes on Katya and completely ignores her. He even visits the academy all the time just to see her, despite having graduated 2 years ago. Sure, Katya was the protagonist of this game, but his attitude towards his fiancée made her hate him even more. This was the world of the game named In Love X Dungeon, abbreviated as Love X Dan, and Silviana Mercolini was the villainess in it. This was a bizarre game mixing dungeon-crawling RPG mechanics with school romance simulation, famously known as a trash game because no one knew who it was made for. In her previous life, she played it though. In the game, Silviana relentlessly bullied Katya, and in the end, she was executed. In some routes, she even stood before the player as the final boss. But with what happened to her today, she believed she had avoided the execution route. On her 8th birthday, she realized she had been reincarnated as the Villainess, and even she was surprised by how quickly she adapted to the game. What was done after all, and she decided to avoid the inevitable execution route and survive as a Villainess. For that self-improvement above all as a final boss candidate, her specs were more than sufficient. So from childhood, she asked her parents to train her. In the game, her parents were even more villainous than Silviana herself, but by roping them into her training, they had no time for crime and they built a clean ducal house instead. Because of that, they became slightly overbearing parents, but it was still worth it. At the academy, she kept as low a profile as possible, treated the heroine kindly to avoid conflict while secretly going adventuring on the side to make the life she wanted come true. And finally, the day she had been waiting for had come, the annulment. At last, she obtained a house and farm that she bought with her own money. This was the life of Sylvie Linney, not the prince's wife. She believed that her peaceful, slow life was going to begin now. She was going to live in a rural town from the royal capital and work the fields on a large farm. She was going to cook and bake whatever she wanted and thought about keeping a pet. She tried not to think about it too much, but in her previous life she died before fulfilling her dream. She was too soft-hearted, unable to say no when asked. Before she knew it, she was a corporate slave drowning in black company. She couldn't even remember how she died. But one thing she remembered was that it was her dream to run a traditional-style cafe with her sister. Even if she had been reborn in such a strange world, this time she was dedicated to living the life she wanted and would never become a final boss. She was going to live for herself. Her big hopes and dreams were a bit crushed when her mother came through the teleportation circle and informed her that the royal family had summoned her because they weren't too happy with the annulment. Silviana was shocked because she had made it official, but that didn't seem to count, so she had to go. The ducal house of Mercolini, where Silviana was born, was a prestigious noble family carrying royal blood. And yet, due to certain circumstances, they also became a martial lineage where outstanding talents as adventurers gathered. Silviana wore a pretty dress and had an entirely different attitude when she entered the carriage. Her parents complimented her on how beautiful she looked again. She thanked them, but was still trying to process the fact that she was sent back home the very next day. Her father stated how unforgivable it was for Christopher to annul their engagement in public like that. That was how the story goes in the game, but she decided to stay silent. Her mother figured that she foresaw the annulment and bought a farm, and said she felt lonely living apart from her. Silviana mentioned that the teleportation circle made it pretty easy for them to meet. Her father then asked if she had that item prepared for the discussion with the royal family, and she said she did. She had prepared it for a situation like this, and which of them was in the right, His Highness or her, would soon be decided. When she entered the palace, she greeted everyone nobly, but Prince was still angry and started yelling at her, saying that the annulment wouldn't be cancelled even if she came to apologize now. Silviana stated that she thought she was summoned to sign the annulment papers and came here all excited. Prince was still mad, so his brother came and told Silviana that her tongue was too loose and asked where her respect for the royal family was. Edgar, Christopher's younger brother, seemed much more serious than she thought. His glare made her nervous, but in this situation she was the enemy, so it couldn't be helped. Second Prince Edgar Bernelium was 2 years younger than Christopher and he was her classmate, but she didn't know him that well. As a fiancé, she avoided interacting with male students, and in the game he was just a minor character anyway, but she wondered why Prince Christopher grew so close to Katya, who was 2 years younger. It reminded her of alumni who kept hanging around in her past life. Edgar stated that it was chaos after yesterday's graduation ceremony. He said his brother's actions weren't commendable, but there was a calmer way to handle it for sure. Silviana stated that she didn't want to reveal herself as an adventurer either, and only spoke up to settle the matter in that moment. Her words made him even more mad, and he scolded her for making excuses. Something felt off because this attitude and anger were unnatural, even if he was worked up from his brother being insulted. The king told everyone to calm down and said they were confused too. He stated that annulments weren't something to be rushed, but Prince Christopher interrupted his father's words, saying they already had proof of Silviana's misdeeds. Silviana calmly stated that those were just broken things and they couldn't call this proof. But apparently Katya said she did it to her, and she even got injured. Silviana reminded him that she was in a dungeon that day. He claimed that her story didn't make any sense because, special exceptions aside, this whole S-rank adventurer claim of hers didn't have proof either. She said she would show him everything and took out the box she had with her. It was crystal time. Time crystals were a recording medium made from magic stones. In the game, it was used as a save item and it was extremely expensive. 1 year ago, the day Katya attended the entrance ceremony, though a commoner, Katya awakened to healing magic and transferred into St. Aideen Academy. Prince Christopher claimed that she shoved her into the bond, and it was only because he happened to be there that he saved her. Silviana stated that she attended the entrance ceremony as a representative of the current students that day, and as soon as it ended, she headed to the dungeon, so she never even went near the pond. The second accusation was that Silviana tore Katya's sheet music, but then she showed the proof of her being on the festival committee, and she had no breaks at all from preparations for about a month. Panicked, Christopher mentioned the time at the New Year's banquet, but she showed that she was by the Queen's side receiving instruction. Every accusation Prince made of her was proven wrong by the crystals. He finally realized that Katya's story didn't match. Silviana responded that it was simple and explained to him in one sentence. He was just being deceived by Lady Katya. Christopher started shaking because Katya lied to him. Edgar started to question if it was really necessary to record everything with such a huge supply because time crystals were expensive. It was almost as if she knew something would happen. Silviana noticed that he was more capable than his brother. She stated that it was to protect herself. Many resent the Mercolini family's bond with the royal family, and if she made a mistake at the academy, it could drag the royal family down too. That's why she recorded her actions so she couldn't be framed. She said that proved that she was falsely accused of bullying and she had nothing in her conduct to be ashamed of. And of course, she was going to be paying her back thoroughly later. She was the Villainess, and she refused to be asked for things that didn't even make sense. Even this very scene was recorded in the time crystal as well. She told Prince Christopher that he should reflect on his own disgraceful behavior. He tried to blame her again, but she didn't let him. She said that he had only himself to blame because he forgot royal dignity, fell for a woman, and was deceived by her. This disgrace should be carved into the history of the royal palace forever. Edgar told her that she was going too far, but she said that there was no reason for her to show respect to someone who annulled an engagement in that manner. She then turned to Christopher and yelled at him that the height of depravity was to pursue another woman while having a fiancé. Even the king was shocked after that. She believed the engagement was indeed dissolved now. Her parents stood by her side and said they were not so generous as to laugh off their daughter being insulted, and found it pitiful that this was the future king. He said they should be free to choose the one to whom they swear loyalty. The Villainess's dreadful parents were showing themselves, and Silviana was sure it was over. Now at last she needed something for her slow life. She asked for compensation for the damage. She was falsely accused and had her engagement broken off, and surely the royal family would take responsibility and compensate her. That seemed like the last straw for Prince Christopher. He attempted to use fire magic on Silviana. Silviana was also shocked because for His Highness, who didn't have that much power, to form such a large fireball meant that he trained somewhat seriously. So she was actually impressed. Edgar told him to stop, but Christopher didn't listen to them and attacked Silviana with that huge fireball. Silviana didn't even care anymore, and she easily threw the fireball away. Edgar couldn't believe that she took the fireball head-on and threw it away. She threw the fireball right next to the wall where Prince Christopher was standing and used water lance to stop the fire. She then acted like she was terrified by all that. Her parents knew if it were Sylvia, she could have turned him to as instantly, and yet she missed on purpose. Silviana turned to the king and said she would be expecting an increase in compensation. The king had no choice but to agree with her after this incident. In the next scene, Silviana was having breakfast in her own house. It was a quiet morning in the countryside, and she was waking up to the sound of birds. All she wanted to do was to wear something casual, not ringlets or dresses, and enjoy a slow breakfast. She started to think about how she should spend her day starting today. While she was thinking, her door was knocked on. Wondering who it might be this early, she opened the door only to close it immediately because it was Edgar. He kept knocking on the door and telling her not to shut it. She said this house was unoccupied while trying to understand why he came here. He said that he came here to apologize. Silviana decided to open the door and said that if it was an apology from the royal family, the settlement money already took care of that. He bowed to her and said it was about his behavior yesterday. That was not the way to treat a woman who was literally annulled, and he was sorry for that. Silviana was surprised that he came all the way just for that. She wasn't surprised when he claimed that her insolent attitude toward the royal family was another matter. She thought he came to apologize sincerely, but then he got angry about her rudeness. He was so serious, unlike his brother. It was true that she kind of enjoyed playing the villainous role a bit too much. Edgar then wondered what she was plotting in a place like this. Apparently, this was his territory, and he said he wouldn't leave a dangerous person like her alone. Silviana didn't expect that to happen because she thought this land was unrelated to the royal family. She said it was a complete coincidence, and she didn't know, but he didn't believe her. He said that he could understand her wanting to retire in the countryside after breaking things off with the royal family, but normally she would choose land with no ties to the royal family. He asked if she really thought no one would notice because this land was separated from the main territory. He asked if she was plotting something like a coup or rebellion. Silviana told him that in both the annulment and the attempted murder incidents, she was the victim, and he must stop making her sound like the villain. Edgar didn't expect her to react like that and apologized. She wasn't sure if it was okay for him to bow so easily, even though he was a royal. He was so straightforward that he threw her off balance. She explained to him that her dream was a slow life. The kind of life she admired was cultivating a field and cooking with the vegetables she grew herself, so plotting something was out of the question. But Edgar had the most untrusting look on his face that he didn't even need to say anything. Now that she had explained herself, she started pushing him back and said she accepted his apology. She said receiving a monthly settlement payment would be enough. She said he wasn't done talking, but she sent him off with a teleportation circle. The next day, Edgar returned. He thanked her for forcing him back to the royal palace yesterday to point out the irony. She asked why he was here this time. He claimed that he wasn't satisfied with yesterday's explanation, and questioned whether a duke's daughter would really want to farm fields. She told him to watch and see because she was going to start preparing her field today anyway. He said there was no way she could manage such a vast field alone. She said she was still deciding what to grow. She said carrots, potatoes, corn, and tomatoes were a must, and she also wanted apples, oranges, lemons, figs, and other kinds of fruits. But for the start, dungeon-grown vegetables would be best. He asked what she was holding. She said those were seeds and seedlings she brought back from the dungeon. Seeds and seedlings from dungeons were easier to grow in surface fields and were more nutritious than normal. But once they grown on the surface, they wither after one generation and wouldn't produce again. So she had to keep going into dungeons to gather new seeds and seedlings regularly. She questioned who would come up with such a weird system for a moment, but then noticed that Edgar was right behind her. She said it was good for beginners. The next step was the water. She went to a well and summoned a water spirit named Aqua. Edgar was pretty surprised. She asked Aqua to purify that well water, and within seconds the water was pure. Next, she called for an earth spirit named Terra. She asked him to nurture this soil so that even non-dungeon crops would grow well. Edgar couldn't believe his eyes because she was contracted with 2 spirits. Contracting with a spirit itself was not too hard for a mage, but she could normally only contract with spirits close to her own attribute, and water and earth were particularly hard among the 4 great spirits. To be connected to both was unreal. But Silviana said that was nothing and summoned Ignis the fire spirit and Ventus the wind spirit. Silviana was contracted with all 4 great spirits and said it was more convenient to have them all. Ignis waited for her request, but she said she just wanted to introduce him and then ordered him to carry those seed potatoes over there. Edgar had never heard of such a thing. Controlling all 4 spirits and making them work farm chores was not the farming he had imagined. He started to grow an interest in her power. Silviana stated that this was her version of a slow life plan. Instead of harsh adventure, she uses her magic for herself. She had been busy fulfilling requests from the royal family as an adventurer after all. She also mentioned that the one who asked her to go into the dungeons was the former king, Edgar's grandfather. 2 years ago when he abdicated, the former king recognized her ability. In exchange for a certain request, she was granted a special exception adventurer's license. That request was to secure nutritious dungeon-grown vegetables for the elderly former king and queen. Edgar was shocked that this was the request. She said she was properly paid, so it was a win-win situation, though it was a grueling lifestyle. A duke's daughter secretly being an adventurer was scandal enough, and her client was a top-secret matter. That's why she hid it, juggling student, adventurer, and duke's daughter all at once, because she believed it was for the royal family. But now, thanks to the annulment, it was all over. Her parents told her not to come home for a while, so she took this chance to retire from adventuring too and live alone in the countryside. She lost both her family and fiancé and came to this countryside town. With tears in her eyes, she asked if it wasn't okay for her to want to finally live for herself. Edgar realized that she had nowhere else to go, and this meant that their royal family threw her into the depths of despair. But he didn't know that Silviana was just kidding. It was actually all true. But it was about how she said it. Her parents would never disown her, and they just wanted her to take her time and relax in the countryside. She asked if he was convinced that she just wanted to live quietly. Edgar seemed ashamed and said he would leave. Silviana was relieved that he backed down but couldn't help but wonder why he was pestering her so much. In the game, Edgar had handsome CGS and was popular among players. He wasn't even a main love interest. She decided to let that issue go because it was the end of villainous Silviana's role. From now on, it was the free life of Sylvie Linny. However, the next day Edgar showed up again saying he was still not convinced and said he wouldn't be deceived. She told him once again that she was not plotting anything and asked him to go home. He said he couldn't ignore the chance she would snap when cornered, and as lord and as royalty, he must keep watch over a dangerous person like her. He said that he was going to keep coming to this house until her innocence was proven. Silviana was so annoyed and pushed him again. He stated that he would not leave an S-rank adventurer unsupervised, but she corrected him that she was retired. In the next scene, it had been a while and Silviana's farm was looking good. She had a 2-story family-type house with plenty of rooms. She was planning to raise chickens. The field started with potatoes. The well had already been maintained by Aqua, and she was going to rebuild the fence as soon as possible. The weather was so nice, and it was the perfect day for a slow life that day. However, Edgar once again showed up asking what she was planning to do today. She was upset that he came again today, and he reminded her that he would be watching her. She said she was going to the city of Oldie to greet the Adventurers Guild about her move. She wanted to go much earlier, but a certain someone kept coming to bother her every day, and she was a young lady living alone. He said she could teleport him away like before if she disliked it. She said she didn't want to be rude by teleporting away a royal, and besides, building a teleportation circle was hard work. It was magic that allowed instant movement to a predetermined location, but it consumed a huge amount of mana. He asked if she was going to walk to Oldie instead of warping. She said she would because it was spring and she wanted to take her time walking on her own feet. Edgar looked around him and agreed with her. She asked if he was planning to follow her because it was a 20-minute walk. He said he could walk that much and told her not to underestimate him just because he was royalty. That wasn't the point, but Sylviana didn't bother to explain herself to him once again. When they arrived, the first thing she did was to order hot dogs. She had been dying to eat this, so she was very happy. Confused, Edgar asked if she wasn't going to the guild. She told him to relax and asked for one more hot dog. She gave the hot dog to him and said rushing was forbidden in slow life. Edgar's mouth was watering after smelling the delicious hot dogs, and he seemed to enjoy them a lot. The hot dog man asked her if she had finished moving to her farm. She said she did and said they should get along as fellow citizens on Oldie. While walking to the guild, everyone who saw her seemed to know her, and some asked her to help their party next time. Some asked her to accompany their kid who was trying a dungeon for the first time, and commented how it was such a relief to have her there. Edgar couldn't help but notice that she was more famous than he and asked if she was hiding her Duke family status. She said she was only famous as Sylvie Leany, the adventurer. Having an S-rank adventurer in a peaceful town like this made people curious, so they treated her kindly. She had traveled to many places as an adventurer, but this town felt the most comfortable. That's why she chose it as her retirement place. When they arrived at the Adventurers Guild, the guild master was so happy to see her. He then saw Edgar and recognized him. Commoners didn't usually remember the second prince's face, but it was natural for the guildmaster. He apologized for not serving tea and asked why Edgar was with Sylvie. She said she kept tailing her, suspicious that she had settled in his territory after cutting ties with the royal family. She said that he should have told her if this land was his, but the guildmaster mentioned that she really liked that property. She said it would be troublesome if word spread, so she said they would say Edgar was a rookie adventurer. That was so careless, but he knew he was still a beginner, even if he trained at the academy, so he asked the master to take care of him. Edgar then wondered if the Master Guild knew about Sylviana's background. She said yes and added that he had been helping her for about 3 years. 3 years ago, her mother introduced her to him, and at first he was surprised that a duke's daughter became an adventurer. But with the Mercolini family, it made sense. The Mercolini dukes had always been a martial family. The first Mercolini was originally royal, but ran away, saying he wanted to be an adventurer. He made a name as a top adventurer, then retired and was granted dukedom, a wild and unconventional origin. It was the same with Sylvie's parents. Her mother was born a commoner, but she was a master of healing magic and was also a first-class adventurer. Her father fell in love at first sight and courted her. Nobles were born with abundant mana and learn martial arts and magic to earn adventurer licenses. But after graduation, most work in public service or temples, and few actually become adventurers because it was considered a barbaric job. The guildmaster then asked her if it was true that she was retiring as an adventurer. She explained that dangerous jobs weren't for her and she just wanted a slower life. She only became an adventurer because it was the fastest way to earn money, and she even finished all the high-level requests in this town. She had already saved enough to run the farm, and her dream of a slow life had already started. Edgar was surprised that she earned all that in just 3 years. The farmland, house, and the running costs were a lot, and to prove her innocence, she also bought tons of expensive time crystals. 1 day's worth of time crystals was equal to a month's living cost for a family of 4. She had about a year's worth. She must have needed a fortune, and she kept studying at the academy while doing all that. As a sheltered noble, Edgar could hardly imagine hard labor, so he was shocked by the amount of work Sylviana did. Sylviana asked what he was muttering about, but he dodged her. She then told the guildmaster to call her if something happened, like during a stampede, but that rarely happens. She said she couldn't just stand by if it did, so she would keep adventuring as a side job. The more she talked, the more shocked Edgar was. She kept casually dropping unbelievable things. It seemed her power really was out of the ordinary. With that strength, she could amass a fortune, even overthrow the state. Yet instead, she abandoned it all for retirement. He concluded in his mind that there was no way she wouldn't plot something. Suddenly, they heard a commotion coming from the square. Sylviana said she would go check it, and Edgar followed her. When they arrived at the square, Han, the old lady, was crying her eyes out, begging Sylvia to save her son. She told her to calm down and asked what was going on. She said that he had just got his adventurer's license and that she told him to take someone with him, but he went into a dungeon alone. They say he was surrounded by monsters and couldn't move. The survivors managed to send words. Sylviana couldn't believe he would do that when she always said beginners need veterans to accompany them in dungeons. Anyone could get a license if they passed the exam, but real combat was completely different. Edgar said that dungeon training wasn't something beginners could do alone, even at the academy. The rule forbidding licenses until graduation was far too dangerous. She said she would save him right now and ordered them to put in a rescue request at the guild. She asked which dungeon he went to, and they said it was the Southern Forest. She was even more mad because that was where the strongest monsters around here appeared. There were plenty of beginner-friendly dungeons near Oldie. She couldn't use resurrection magic, so they had to hurry. Edgar stopped her because she was unarmed, and she would be reckless like this. She said it was fine and took out her fan, saying it was because she had that. Edgar was confused, but she didn't have time to explain to him. She didn't want to use a teleportation circle, but every second counted, so she drew one. When she stood in the middle, Edgar stepped inside the circle and said he was coming too. Edgar wanted to see her adventurous skills for himself and believed he would figure out what she was really plotting. They arrived at the entrance of the dungeon. Sylviana said she needed to hurry and retrieve those fledgling adventurers. Dungeons were ruins or caves imbued with magical power, a mystical existence created by the goddess Aideen, who governs this world, as a trial for humanity. It was Edgar's first time entering a dungeon outside of class training. She was glad this one was relatively easy to walk through because the dungeon she entered at the age of 10 was damp. The floor was slippery and it was the worst. Her parents threw her in there, nothing but a knife, and also tossed her off a cliff and into the ocean. She did ask them to train her without holding back, so she couldn't really blame them. Her mother was skilled in resurrection magic, so her stopper was broken. Edgar was shocked that she had even been resurrected before. Even so, not a single monster had appeared, so he questioned if it was really possible not to encounter any at all. She explained that it wasn't that they didn't want to appear, they just couldn't because she was using the intimidation skill. It was a skill that displays one's power across the area. Low-level monsters lose the will to fight and can't move. That magic was something only dungeon bosses could use, but she corrected that it was actually quite convenient to learn. Sylviana noticed that Edgar was properly following the basics of being an adventurer because he never let her guard down, always watched his surroundings, and kept his hand on his sword so he could move at any time. Edgar had been suspicious of her abilities all along, and he was right to be. He didn't swallow other people's words without a thought and wanted to see with his own eyes to confirm. He actually impressed Sylviana a lot at that moment. They heard a noise coming from deep inside the dungeon and moved faster to get them. Behind the ruins, countless monsters were attacking the adventurers. She told Edgar not to move and asked if he knew how monsters think. He said it was by instinct and they devoured humans. They only see humans as prey, so that's why, if a more attractive target appears, their attention could be drawn away. For that purpose, Sylviana climbed the big rock and told everyone to close their eyes for 5 seconds. She used her charm to catch the monster's attention, and it was a success. Edgar was shocked that she was going to face it alone, but she said she wasn't alone. She used Ventus and Ignis and ordered them to burn them all to ashes. Ventus and Ignis were even bickering while also working together. Edgar was shocked that she was scolding spirits in a situation like this. Ignis and Ventus combined their power and burned the monsters within minutes. After they were all dead, they checked everyone, and they were alive. Edgar told Sylvia that the adventurers were secure. He said he would hunt down anything he missed and told her to go all out. She said fine, but she only used her fan to kill a monster because apparently his feelings were enough. The adventurers were amazed by her. Sylviana said monsters turn into magic stones when they die, so she figured the adventurers wanted to aim for high-quality stones to go to those dungeons. But as an adventurer, she told them to know their limits. She said they were going to redo their training from the start, and even then their strength would not be enough. She told them to rely on her. Seeing her talk like that, the adventurers realized that she was the S-rank adventurer, Sylvie Linney, and Edgar confirmed that she was the real deal. After that, they returned to the town, and Han was so happy that her son was back. The guild master scolded them for doing something so reckless. Sylviana calmed the master because they were already reflecting on their actions. And besides, they understood that they were seconds away from being eaten alive and turned into chunks of meat, and wouldn't pull a stunt like that ever again. She said she would accompany them herself next time once they completed their retraining, but she would be strict this time. The master asked if that was all right, so she said it was already promised with Han, but she couldn't overwork herself because her farm was her main job. Edgar commented that she was surprisingly good at looking after others. She said it was a bad habit of hers to add extra work herself, but this was already the town where she lived, so it was natural that she would want to protect it. All those commotions made her really hungry. Edgar bought her pancakes to repay her for the hot dog earlier. He couldn't afford to owe a debt to someone he was supposed to be monitoring. She told him to dig in without hesitation. He tried to resist at first, but it was so delicious that he couldn't help himself. While eating, he commented that her battle in the dungeon was remarkable. With that power, she could overthrow the kingdom. But the thing he was curious to know was that if she ever wanted to kill his brother for hurting her. Shocked, Sylviana said she would never think something so shallow, like she hated him, so she would kill him. Edgar didn't even know that she hated his brother. She apologized for insulting her brother, but said he clearly gave off an aura that he hated her too. She still respected him as her fiancé, and at least until he neglected his duties while fawning over Lady Katya. But still, hurting someone just because you dislike them would make her inhuman, and he was not planning to retire from humanity just yet. Edgar said she was a baffling one and he would have to keep monitoring her for a while longer. He then mentioned that since she was going to pretend he was just a rookie adventurer, he allowed her to call him by his name. They were the same age, so they didn't need honorifics. In the next scene, Edgar heard Sylviana scream and rushed to see if she was okay. She said that the potato field had been destroyed. He told her that this was not an incident, but she said it was because the seed potatoes she worked so hard to plant got dug up. She was sure it was the work of horned rabbits. It was a rabbit-type monster that devastated farmers' fields. This was unforgivable for her. It had only been half a month since she planted them. She had even decided on the first dish, baked potatoes with butter. She was so angry that she swore to turn them into horned rabbit stew. She ordered Ignis to find the culprit and Ventus to go with him and make sure Ignis didn't go out of control. When they left, Edgar couldn't help but comment that her spirits had weird personalities. She agreed with him and said that if he had free time, he should help. He said he wasn't free, but she said his surveillance duty looked like he was skipping his government duties. So, helping her out could count as part of her compensation for his brother breaking off the engagement. Edgar knew she wouldn't accept no, so he asked what she wanted him to do. She said she wanted him to channel lightning magic into this wire. Edgar figured that she was planning to make an electric fence as a countermeasure against pests. He then noticed that this wire was mithril. It was a rare and extremely valuable material, and he told her not to use it for farming. But she said she had got mithril to spare at home. He explained that ordinary households didn't have that. It was basically announcing to the world that this house had valuables inside. Even if it keeps the beasts out, it might attract thieves instead. He told her to be more cautious if she were a young lady living alone. While bringing him a normal wire, Sylviana wondered if he didn't think she could defeat a thief or two herself. She then realized that surveillance was not just about watching over his own territory, it was about worrying for the person living in it. She wondered if he was too serious or too kind-hearted. She thought she might have overdone it when she acted weak and emotionally in front of him. She wondered if he was really okay with spending so much time on her. Yesterday, her father said that the royal palace was still in an uproar. It seemed they were still deciding how to punish Prince Christopher, and the situation was complicated. Even their ducal family had been called in to help with government affairs. They say the second prince, Edgar, had been swamped with inspections by day and paperwork at night. Sylviana realized that he was dropping by her place in between those inspections and was punishing himself quite a bit. It was almost like she was in her previous life. In her previous life, her dream was to run a cafe in an old house with her sister. Her sister was going to cook, and she, in her past life, planned to make sweets. They would display handmade trinkets, sell local vegetables, and it was overflowing with things she wanted to do. Working at a regular company to save funds while attending night confectionery school was a lot to handle. Before she knew it, the business of everyday life left her unable to think at all, and it all ended so abruptly. While working with the wires, Edgar noticed that Sylviana was taking a while. Suddenly, countless horn rabbits were coming at him. He told Sylviana's spirits not to bring them over there, but they didn't listen to him and were fighting again. He was nowhere near S rank, but he was still a rookie adventurer, so he started slashing the rabbits. After his first kill, he seemed pretty confident and said he would protect this field. When Sylvie returned, she asked what all this noise was. She saw the horned rabbits piled up and they were all dead. She was quite surprised that he slashed them all. He said she would make them into stew, so he killed them. She complimented him and said he was amazing. There were too many to eat and they would crush the horns and use them for potion ingredients. She was so happy because no riffraff would dare approach them again and thanked him. Edgar was a bit embarrassed, so he changed the topic and asked if she had found the wire. Before that, she took out a blanket and wanted to take a break. Edgar was shocked that she prepared all those snacks, but she said it was for two, and she just wanted a taste tester. She said he needs to eat and rest properly too, unless he would rather go back to the palace to rest. But Edgar preferred to stay here and eat with her. Edgar tried everything she prepared and loved them all. Sylviana was glad it suited his taste. She then asked him to work here at this house. She knew he had already decided he would keep up surveillance and she wouldn't stop him, but he had been sleep deprived, and collapsing from overwork was absolutely not okay. So instead, she told him to use his surveillance time efficiently. He could sort through things in her workroom like that paperwork he had been doing at night. Edgar didn't even know that she knew about this. She even gave him this Nanimo hire because she had gotten extras anyway. Nandemo hire was an item enchanted with storage magic, and they could put as much as they liked. It was a convenient item that showed how desperate the game developers were. Edgar told her not to give away such a luxury item. It was a super rare product created by a few spatial magic artisans by combining magic stones. She knew that, but it would be easier to carry around if he put his paperwork inside. That was true, but Edgar was still uneasy about it, so she told him to help her out on the farm to make it even. This was her version of slow life. Edgar couldn't help but chuckle because she was so ridiculously out of the ordinary, and it was so funny. After that moment with Silviana, Edgar realized that his brother was under a curse. His brother was a fool not to notice the existence of someone as captivating as Silvilini. In the next scene, Silviana was working with silver clay. She shaped the clay together with fragments of magic stones, added carvings, and poured in just a little magic and create a charm earring that makes you look a bit cuter when you wear it. One part of her slow life plan was to make money by selling accessories, and she finally had time to make some. The shopkeeper of the dining hall told her that her accessories were super popular and always sell out right away. She was the best-selling creator in the town. She hoped that her accessories would become something that helps a girl feel confident, even a little. She was a bit embarrassed though, because in both her past life and this one, she had been far too disconnected from romance, and she admitted that she had a bit of a girlish streak. She then suddenly remembered that Edgar didn't come today. He was even working here yesterday. Even though they were brothers, Prince Christopher wasn't like him at all. Edgar was serious, full of justice. At first, he kept picking fights with her, and it was a nuisance, but lately he had softened up a lot. Her plan to feed him with well food seemed to work on him. She suddenly started questioning what kind of relationship she and Edgar had now. They were kind of relatives because of their family. Since they met as kids, she could call them childhood friends, but they only talked properly after the annulment. He was surprisingly easy to talk to and someone she didn't have to put on airs with, so she might consider calling him her friend. He might be the first man outside of adventurers she could talk to casually. She wondered what he was thinking. She heard some whispers outside and opened her door. It was Edgar. She welcomed her and said he was a little late today. He suddenly wanted to apologize to her. Confused, Silviana waited for him to explain. He said that his brother was under a charm curse. The truth was that traces of curses had been found all over the castle. Silviana was shocked and asked who would do that. He responded that, unknowingly, charming those around her was Lady Katya. The investigation report came in last night, and Edgar was shocked to learn that his brother was cursed. He was informed that the influence of the curse even spread to his father and Edgar. Christopher went to a dungeon he wasn't authorized to enter and got cursed, with Katya a comment despite having a fiancé. Further investigation was needed, but it was likely that Christopher and Lady Katya, with guards, entered an unexplored ruin for training. There, Katya was cursed by an ancient demon's spell, and as a result, she unconsciously spread charm to those around her. Christopher, being right beside her, was heavily affected. Lady Katya was still at the temple undergoing purification. What's worse, the curse affected the entire castle. The royals and the servants grew fond of Lady Katya, and anyone who threatened her was seen as an enemy to eliminate. And that was how their thoughts were warped. Looking back now, his father wondered why he didn't question it, and that was probably why he so easily agreed to break his engagement with Lady Silviana. Edgar realized that he really did get strangely heated at that time. Even with his obsession with driving Sylvie out of the territory was due to the curse, and he didn't realize it at all. He looked at his brother and wondered if he had always had such dark eyes. The brother he knew was kind, encouraging, and happy. Her brother was skilled at spotting people's talents and nurturing them. He was the first to recognize his gift for swordsmanship and magic control, and he helped design his training menu. So when he discovered Katya's abilities and often visited the academy after graduation to train her, Edgar thought it was just like him. He never imagined love was involved and regrets that he didn't notice it sooner. After all that had happened with Katya, Prince Christopher was still blaming everything on Silviana. He said that even with A-rank adventurers, they proceeded carefully, and it was just bad luck that Katya was cursed, and it was all to prove her ability to the royal family. Edgar told him to calm down and said that entering a dungeon meant recognizing your own limits as an adventurer. That's what he was taught. But Christopher didn't value his opinion and started getting physical. Their father told Christopher to stop this disgraceful display. His punishment would be decided soon, and for now, he told him to focus on completing the purification. Since they didn't have strong ties to them, the curse's effect on their father and Edgar was mostly gone. Still, just in case, he wanted Edgar to be purified at the temple first thing in the morning. Back to the present, Edgar told everything to Silviana, and she was so shocked. Edgar couldn't even look at her face while apologizing for seeing her as an enemy and attacking her. Silviana was surprised to see him like this and told him that he wasn't under its influence anymore, so that was fine. At the palace, she thought he was acting a little strange, but when the prince attacked, he still moved to protect her. Even later, when he barged into the farm, his words and actions didn't match. Now that she actually knows the reason behind his unstable actions, it is a relief. She asked if he understood that watching over her was not necessary, and he confirmed her, saying there was no one as reliable as her. But he still regretted his own dullness for not questioning his brother's actions. Silviana told him that this wasn't something for him to worry about. What the prince did was his own responsibility. He knew he would one day support the kingdom, and yet he got infatuated with Katya, went to a dangerous dungeon, and got cursed. That was entirely his own fault. Edgar couldn't help but feel convinced since he was hearing that from the victim herself. He recalled the days when her brother told him to protect this country together one day. It was a difficult situation to be in. Silviana did her best once too, but she was born a villainess and she knew the annulment was inevitable. If he wanted to be with Katya instead of her, as the crown prince, he had many walls to overcome. Whether he worked to do so or abandoned his position and eloped with Katya, either way it would have been a thorny path. She was about to regret not being able to tell him that, but then recalled the mistreatments and decided that the one at fault was really the prince. Such spinelessness didn't change so easily after all. She was annoyed that it had gotten gloomy again and decided to make hamburgers. A greasy, calorie-packed, unhealthy lunch would make them feel better, so she told Edgar to help her. Edgar was confused but still decided to follow her orders. While making the hamburgers, Edgar commented that charm was such a powerful spell and asked if she had never thought to use it on his brother. Silviana told him that they hated each other and she would never want to manipulate someone by ignoring their will. It wasn't that she wanted to interfere with his love. She said that if she ever falls in love, she wanted to try her own effort with accessories, cheering her on. Edgar saw the look on her face and noticed that it was the first time. Silviana asked what he was talking about and he said she looked like a maiden. She told him to quit saying weird things and get back to cooking. Meanwhile, Silviana's magic accessories were selling at a good price and someone named Lord Dryden was supplying them for the sake of their main business. In the next scene, Silviana and Edgar went to town to deliver some accessories. Edgar saw the bag she was holding and figured that it was the amulet she was making earlier. An amulet was a magic tool that granted effects like charm or a blessing. They had all got a reputation for being hard to get. Edgar realized that no matter what job she did, she would always make a living. They entered the diner and saw the manager and even the cafe lady. They asked Sylvie to take a look at something. She bought this at a newly opened shop on Gruner Street and it was an earring Sylvie made. Sylvie looked at the earrings and said there was no way this was her work. The silver was of poor quality and the carvings were unbalanced on each side, but it was sold with the slogan magic-infused charm earrings. They thought they were her work, so they bought them. When they wear her earrings, she gets lots of tips from customers, but in those, the reaction was bad. So they came to ask if they might be fake. Silviana confirmed that the design was clearly imitating hers. Edgar said it really did look alike. Silviana was seriously offended and told him not to lump her together with this kind of trash. She carefully infused each piece with magic, one by only supplied them to this store, so those were definitely fakes. The diner lady found her products good quality, but that also makes them pricey. That's why the women bought the cheap ones. Silviana noticed that the buyers weren't at fault. The ones to blame were the creators. With weak magic power, the charm wouldn't even activate. Worse, if a clumsy spellcaster injects magic, there is the risk of an explosion. She was so angry. Making a fake charm that could endanger someone's life was unforgivable for her. A surge of anger wells up from the bottom of her heart. Not only did they insult her work, but they also tricked people and even put them in danger. While she was thinking about storming into that shop and punishing them directly, Edgar looked at her worried. He asked what was wrong and told her to calm down. She said she was calm, but it was obvious that she was furious. He touched her shoulder and looked at her eyes. She realized that she was letting her anger control her and thanked him for calming her. She said she was fine now. The women apologized for misunderstanding her and said they would throw those away. Silviana asked the manager if he should stop delivering new accessories. The manager said it would be a problem because there were lots of people who wanted her products. She said that there was nothing wrong or guilty about her work, and she would take full responsibility for selling them. The women wanted to buy the new ones right away and felt so lucky to get them right after they arrived. Silviana thanked everyone for their support. After giving the accessories to the manager, they left the shop. Edgar told Sylvie that it was common for knockoffs of popular products to spread around, and he knew it must be frustrating for her as the creator. She knew he was right, but even so, she let her temper flare up that much, and for a moment she almost got swallowed by her anger. She recalled the pull of the final boss Villainess and decided that she couldn't just leave things as they were. This wasn't just her problem. This time it was just accessories, so it turned out fine, but it might be an adventurer's amulet. In the middle of a dungeon, sloppy infused magic would explode, injuring people, and it could even wipe out an entire party. She asked Edgar to help her find the culprit and crush them. Not only did they endanger her, but they also endangered the people who trusted her, and there was no way she could forgive that. Edgar told her that she was still furious. She said she had an idea who it was and decided to head to the guild. The guildmaster asked if this was about the amulets. He said a buyer came to consult him. The Adventurers Guild just started investigating too. From the look on her face, he could tell she wanted to catch the culprit. But this time, the opponent was bad news. Before the guildmaster revealed who was buying those scam-like products, she had already figured that it was the Stryden Trading Company. As far as Edgar recalled, they were a wholesaler in this area. The guildmaster said it was like that on the surface. Dryden was equal to Matheson. He was known for shady large-scale business. But rumor had it he was involved in most of the scams and robberies around here. He was basically the underworld boss controlling the city of Uldi. They also wanted to do something about Dryden Trading Company for the sake of the city's peace, but even if they go after their petty crimes, they only ever catch the small fry. Edgar noticed that every city had someone pulling the strings behind the criminals. Silviana realized that those were similar to Yakuza bosses. Edgar was confused because there was no Yakuza in this world. She figured that this time too, Dryden probably gave the order. He had some nobody craftsmen make the fakes, then supplied them to unsuspecting retailers. Before things get serious, Dryden would just cut ties and escape, as always. If they wanted to catch them, they needed to get the main body, otherwise it was meaningless. In that case, she decided to issue a request to the guild. The request was to investigate the craftsmen making the counterfeits. Guildmaster figured that she was planning to issue the request herself and solve it herself. Silviana confirmed him and said even if she was the one looking for the culprit, as the victim of the fake accessory production, she had to follow proper form. Edgar mentioned that this would only catch the underlings, and there was no proof Dryden was involved. She couldn't just storm in and punch him either. But if she accepts the request and investigates the fake craftsman, she would definitely track it back to Dryden, and then she would collect bounty rewards for all the crimes he was connected to, way more than the request fee. Edgar was intimidated by her determination, but the guildmaster knew that once Sylvie was like this, no one could stop her. He told Sylvie that the guild would also gather information on the counterfeit craftsman, and they would contact her in a few days. After they left the guild, it was time to eat. She ordered an Earl Summer exclusive lemon tart. She had been wanting to try this one. The workers in the cafe wondered who that handsome guy Sylvie was with, and the manager said she was a rookie adventurer. Edgar said when it was like this it felt like a peaceful countryside town, but he had no idea someone that wicked lived in Uldi. Sylvie said basing himself in the countryside was sneaky of him. Dryden was so crafty, that's why even the royal family hasn't cracked down on him. If the guild uncovered crimes too big to handle, the kingdom would step in. But Dryden was skilled at keeping balance. Edgar said selling counterfeits was clearly a misstep because he stuck his hand where he shouldn't have. He said they were counting on her and he would probe through royal family connections too. Sylvie stated that he really helped her today, and thanks to him she stayed calm. She said she was more furious than she thought about her work being disrespected, and even surprised herself. She was worried about losing herself again, but Edgar told her not to worry because he would pull her back before it came to that, because he knew even he wouldn't be able to stop her if she lost it. Sylvie said it might be true. Until now she had turned a blind eye to Dryden, but it was time to teach him a lesson. She decided to make him regret ever crossing her. In the next scene, they went to Mr. Guran's shop. The man asked who they were, and she said they were adventurers putting together a party. They came here on a friend's recommendation and wanted to request Mr. Guran to craft them an amulet. After hearing her words, the man's attitude completely changed, and he welcomed them and said he would make whatever they wanted depending on the price. He invited them in to go over the details. Before going to Guran's shop, the guildmaster told them that there was no doubt this was the man making the counterfeit goods circulating around. He used to work quietly as a magical tool craftsman, but recently he suddenly started living much more extravagantly. When they kept him under surveillance, they caught him coming out of Dryden's mansion. From here on, it was Edgar and Silviana's job. They were going to use this counter-deter to get a hold on Dryden's tail. Besides, this was also the rookie adventurer Edgar's first mission. Guran apologized for the mess as they entered. This was both his home and workshop, and Sylvie figured that the counterfeits would be hidden. Guran asked what kind of amulet she wanted. She said she already had one in mind. She asked if he was the one making the recently talked about S-Class Adventurer certified magic-infused amulet. The magic-infused amulets were being sold on Gruner Street, and she asked if he would make one for her too. Shiran asked what she was talking about because he had never said anything about S-Rank Adventurer certification. He asked if she was misunderstanding something. Edgar appeared behind Guran and said that making excuses was useless. They had already investigated that he was the one making the counterfeits. He said they had a capture order and he would be coming with them to the guild. Guran was calm at first, but then started yelling around, telling them to get out of his way. He tried to attack Sylvie, but she dodged him pretty easily and made him fall. After he fell, Edgar captured him and took out his rope. Sylvie was glad Edgar took care of him because she came here wearing her favorite dress, and it would be a disaster if she got it dirty. Confused, Guran asked who they were. Edgar told him that they were adventurers and one of them was top class. She told Guran that she was after the mastermind who had him make those counterfeits and asked who hired him. Guran wasn't going to tell her that so easily. She said she would let him go if he told her, but he was still unwilling. She said she would have to make him want to talk and told Edgar to step back behind her. Edgar was a bit uneasy about this, but he still listened to her. Sylvie used her intimidation skill on Guerin. Unlike when she released it across a wide area towards the monsters, she focused in one direction, which completely dominated the atmosphere. Guerin was terrified and realized that she might be an S-rank adventurer. He said that this was his chance to spill it if he wanted to. Guerin confessed that it was Dryden. He was hired with money, and if he refused him, he wouldn't be able to survive in this town. Sylvie asked if he had any evidence. He said he didn't because if it gets out that he talked, he would be dead. Sylvie told him to listen and said she didn't want him, she wanted Dryden. And if they catch him, he would be able to live in peace too. She asked if he didn't have some info that could help them bring him down. Guerin asked if she really not going to arrest him, and she said she had already told him. Guerin told them that Dryden conducts monster deals in the basement of his mansion. Sylvie didn't expect something like that because that was blatantly illegal. She asked what he was scheming, but Guerin didn't know that either. She was curious to know what on earth he even used them for. Edgar said he might arrange underground monster fights. For example, in the capital, Vennox's underworld, they were often held. Most of the monster incidents in the city had those kinds of people behind them. Sometimes monsters even escape, or they deliberately set monsters loose in the city as a distraction for other crimes. Of course, every one of those was a heavy crime under the monster control laws. Guerin said that it definitely involved far more money than his counterfeits ever did. Sylviana had only ever been diving dungeons, so she knew nothing of this underworld. But she realized that Edgar was not just royalty in name. She said that there were sometimes late-night monster hunt requests even back in academy days, and wondered if that could have been it. Edgar was shocked that she snuck out of the dorms. She said she had a transfer circle drawn inside her closet. He said there were no such records left in the time crystals, and she explained that normal people were asleep at that time, so there was no need to record it. Guerin wanted them to let him go because he told them everything. Sylvie left the rest to Edgar, and he started dragging Guerin. He said that wasn't the deal. She said she would let him go, but she never said Edgar would. Edgar told Sylvie that they would also need proof that he really was making counterfeits. She started looking around the shop to find them. It didn't take so long to find a built-in safe. Guerin panicked and said he would never give them the key, but this proved that there must be evidence inside. He said he would report them to the guild if they broke it. She said there was no need to break it. It was sealed with magic and only registered users could open it. The keys must be moved in a specific sequence, intertwined in a complex mechanism. This was a peculiar piece, the work of that famously eccentric locksmith Leonard. A wonderful piece of craftsmanship normally would be impossible to open. Guerin said he worked hard to get that thing as part of his share from the magical tool scam. Sylvie started clicking things and unlocked it within seconds. It was thanks to the lockpicking skill straight from her mother, essential for entering old ruins. She found a record of transactions with Dryden himself and counterfeit amulets. Now they had both the evidence and his confession. Still, those carvings were awful. Just looking at them pissed her off. Edgar mentioned to Guerin that she was her real maker of the genuine amulets. She said she would make sure he never produced those fakes again. Edgar told Sylvie that if monster trafficking was true, this was a national matter. That means they could not afford to waste time. They need to stop Dryden as soon as possible. In the next scene, they arrived at Dryden's mansion. As expected of Oldie's notorious trading company, even amongst the luxury district, the mansion stands out as an enormous estate. And underground, he was dealing in monsters. Edgar asked what they were going to do now. They had finished handing Guerin over to the Adventurers Guild. They also got his statement that the forgeries were commissioned by Dryden. That means next, they need to investigate Dryden himself. And along the way, they just happened to discover his monster dealings and arrest him. That's how she would like it to play out. Edgar said there was no guarantee monsters were inside this mansion right now, even with Guerin's testimony. They should gather a bit more evidence, but she said this mansion practically screamed suspicious. Edgar was confused because it looked like a mansion. She told him to focus his eyes with magic and observe. When he listened to her, he saw the lightning magic and a double-layered magical barrier. There was no way a horned rabbit could survive in there. It keeps the intruders out and prevents anything inside from escaping, which proves that they were hiding something. Edgar told him that they could not act recklessly, but she said he had got it backwards. Now that Guerin's been captured, Dryden might already have heard, and of course, they would tighten security. That makes now the best chance to strike. He agreed with her and said they could enter under the pretext of a lawful search. He would head back to the capital to bring the paperwork and soldiers. But Sylvie said she would break in by herself. Edgar told her that this was not the same as entering a dungeon, and she might lose herself to anger again. The guild had a teleportation circle to the capital, and all she needed to do was wait for 20 minutes. When he left, she started observing the mansion. In the World of Falling in Love dungeon, her family, the Marcollinis, extorted bribes from corrupt merchants. If the game was right, this might be the exact place. It was good that Edgar stopped her earlier. She may be a duke's daughter and an S-rank adventurer with real power, but she needs to remember her role in this world, the Villainess. When she was little, her parents always told her that she was strong. She chose harsh training for herself and surpassed even her parents in ability. But there was one thing they wanted her not to forget. Because she had power, she must use it rightly. She was now understanding what they meant. She thought that the game developers might love Sylviana as a joke character who could be made to do anything. But to parents in this world, they would never want their daughter to become a villainess. She didn't want to become the final boss either. While she was lost in her thoughts, she heard some noises coming from inside. She saw a wagon, but it was too far. She used her skill to see clearly and saw the monsters inside the wagon. They were unloading them so brazenly. The guards were gathering at the unloading area, and it was just the right time for her to step in. She decided to take a peek. She coated her arms and legs with magic, deflecting lightning and then silencing magic as well. After adding a camouflage spell, she was invisible. She started walking around in the mansion. The first floor was the trading office with lots of people around. She decided that it was better to hide just in case. She couldn't see the monsters they brought in. She wondered if there was a mage hiding them. She found a hidden door and started heading there. If they were concealing it this heavily with magic, it couldn't just be a wine cellar. She unlocked the door and went inside. Just as she thought, the stairs led underground and she could feel the aura of the monsters suffocating. Monsters were mysterious beings born from dungeons. The stronger they were, the less likely they were to leave a dungeon on their own. But some twisted collectors forcibly capture and tame them. If they could keep them locked in a basement, they couldn't be that strong. Still, there was no room for carelessness. She finally arrived at the door and opened it. There were countless monsters locked inside cells. She was shocked because there were so many monsters gathered, and if they all escaped, it would be a disaster. She suddenly saw a baby dragon. It was a type of monster, but it was highly intelligent and did not attack humans without cause. For that reason, humans usually treat them with respect apart from other monsters. She couldn't believe they would capture this baby. Dragons give absolute trust to humans they recognize as friends, and yet they treat that baby this cruelly. She told him to hold on and promised to defeat the one who captured him. The dragon seemed to like Sylvie. First things first, she knew that if the monsters rampaged, it would be bad. If she attacks first, it would be trouble too. She summoned Ventus and told her to put them to sleep with her fragrance. Ignis was also there, but he couldn't use his fire here. Guards came and spotted Sylvie. They thought the monsters were all dead and asked who she was. They thought she was here to pick a fight with them. Sylvie called them fools and said they were the ones who started this fight, though she guessed grunts like they wouldn't understand. She said she came here to trample them. They started attacking her and asked if she really thought she could win against those numbers. Sylvie took out her fan and deflected the arrow of fire they sent her. They decided to go with swords, but her fan was too strong for them to cut. As she was fighting with one of them, the other one caught her arm and made her drop her fan. They figured she would be powerless without that. Up close, they noticed that she was quite the beauty, and decided to ask Lord Dryden what to do with her. Sylvia said their eyes must be worthless if they couldn't see beauty until they were up close, and used the rope wrapped around her arm to throw the man who thought he caught her. The others were sure she was a monster and started running away from her. She said she just shook him off, and they were being rude. Tying a whip around a woman's arm was despicable. The baby dragon was cheering for her too. Suddenly Lord Dryden came, wondering what all the commotion was about. He called her bold to sneak into his mansion. Sylvie calmly responded that she was sick of hearing that line. In the next scene, Prince Edgar arrived with the search warrant for Dryden and the royal guards. But she wasn't in the place where he had left her. The guards were confused as to what kind of adventurer was dragging Prince Edgar around. Edgar figured that she went in alone and hoped she wasn't reckless. The Dryden Trading Company dealt in women's jewelry, but it didn't look like she came here for shopping, so Dryden asked what kind of business she had here. She said she was an adventurer who was commissioned to investigate those accessories. She said she was the trending S-rank adventurer who endorsed magic-imbued amulets, and she heard his company had been handling counterfeits of those. Dryden acted clueless and said that what they sold here were ordinary goods. Even if by some chance a craftsman they contracted secretly made such things, she couldn't hold them legally responsible. Sylvie said that was his escape plan for the fakes and asked how he explained the monsters. She asked if he called these monsters and dragons ordinary goods. Dryden stated that the counterfeits were just a smokescreen, and this here was the real big business. He said they would have to silence her and started throwing knives at her. His workers were hyped up because no one could withstand Lord Dryden's knife barrage. However, Sylvie simply took out her fan and dodged every one of them. Dryden was shocked. Sylvie said that when things turn inconvenient, he goes straight for silencing people and suggested he try using his head for something other than money-making. That's why he misjudges the strength of the person standing before him. Dryden thought that was just guild exaggeration, but he was sure she was real. She was an S-rank adventurer, Sylvie Linney, The others suggested that Dryden retreat here. But Dryden had a hard time obtaining that dragon, their prize product, so he couldn't let himself be caught here. He apologized and said he didn't realize she was an S rank and said they had no intention of opposing her. He wanted to make a deal with her. He said they would give her 30% of the amulet profits and she could just turn a blind eye to this. Sylvie asked if he was stupid and how far he was planning to mock her. She told him to stop the production and sale of counterfeits immediately. She didn't come here because she was paid. She came because she couldn't forgive him. He should be ashamed for putting adventurers in danger for his own selfish gain. She controlled the knives he threw at her with her fan, and said she was going to teach him the proper way to use magic. They begged her not to kill them while the knives were coming right at them. Sylvia captured everyone with the knives and said she wouldn't kill those small fries. The royal troops would arrive soon and she told them to stay put and behave themselves. She realized that she had let herself get heated again, so she sat for a break. The dragon was so happy that she opened the cage for him. Dryden realized that he was going to end up being seized by the guild and resold, and grabbed one of the knives and threw it at the dragon. Sylvie put herself in front of the dragon to guard him, but before the knife hit her, Prince Edgar came and dodged it. He apologized for being late and asked if she was safe. She said she was and commented that his timing was perfect. Edgar told Dryden that they had received reports of illegal monster trafficking here, and in the name of the royal family he was under arrest. After they caught everyone, Sylvie commented that she didn't expect this to turn into such a major bust. With these many monsters contained, the evidence was plenty. He reminded her that he had told her to wait since it was dangerous. She apologized and said her attention was caught by this little dragon. Edgar wondered where they could find a baby dragon like this. But Sylvie promised to send it back home soon. For now, this case is closed. Dryden was arrested on charges of illegal monster trafficking. Further investigation would likely reveal details of counterfeit sales and other past crimes. In the end, just as Sylvie said, they uncovered a serious crime that the nation could not ignore. Prince Edgar was still working on the oldie case at this hour. The cleanup had already been handed over to the guild, so it was fine now. He told his workers that they all should rest as well. While eating his snack, he realized that he also needed to do a preliminary review for tomorrow's trade negotiations. It used to be his older brother's responsibility, so he was still inexperienced. He wondered how his brother's curse-breaking progressed. The effects of the curse were gone for him, but with this mountain of work, the fatigue really piles up. Even the nobles were working late into the night. He realized that it might be time for him to stop visiting Sylvie's farm. At first, it was to monitor her, but that was no longer necessary. Even with incidents like today, she was more than capable of handling things on her own. That home of hers was so comfortable, he ended up spoiling himself. When he was stuck with only palace work, it felt suffocating. He pushed himself to exert just a little more effort when he heard something outside. When he opened his door, he saw his brother walking like a zombie, saying he was late. Edgar said he was tied up with the oldie case and asked if something had happened. His brother heard that Edgar had been going out every day. He said it was his own selfishness, and he promised not to neglect his duties. He claimed that Edgar was resenting him because he was busy covering for him and cleaning up his mess. But Edgar said that wasn't true at all. But the other nobles also think that they were being troubled by the foolish prince's blunders. All Edgar wanted was for him to recover quickly. Getting cursed in the dungeon was an accident, and no one was to blame. While he was talking, Edgar couldn't help but notice how his eyes were still as dark as ever. Even though he should be visiting the temple every day, there was no sign of improvement. Lady Katya was said to be secluding herself in the temple to break the curse. She took on the most profound aspect of it. The reason his brother wasn't affected as severely was thanks to the protection of the royal amulet. The royal family always wears amulets that ward off curses. But this time, the charm of the curse pierced right through it. Seeing this as a grave issue, the royal magicians were developing new amulets capable of resisting ancient magic as well. He also needs to check in on their progress. If he asked Sylvie, she would probably whip one up in no time. But the royal family cannot burden her any further. It seemed a severe punishment would soon be passed down on Edgar's brother. From Edgar's perspective, he could call it good luck. After his brother left, Edgar realized that he had foolishly hurt Sylvie, but he couldn't bring himself to abandon his own brother. Still, the most he could do is take on his work in his place. If he had no will to change himself, no matter how much he extended his hand, it would be of no use. Afterward, the Dryden Trading Company and many members were arrested and dismantled. It was thought Oldie's commerce would fall into chaos. But perhaps because it swept away long-standing rumors, citizens actually felt relief, and instead their solidarity seemed to strengthen. The monsters that were captured were handled appropriately in cooperation with the guild. As for the dragon, it was decided it would be returned to the wild. In the next scene, Edgar visited Sylvie's house and saw her in the kitchen. The table was a mess, and the baby dragon was also there. She was trying to figure out what food this little one liked, but nothing seemed to please it. Edgar asked why it was here and wondered if she didn't leave it with the guild. She said she did, but until they find where the dragon's home was, it would stay here with her. For now, she was going to be the one looking after it. It seemed to have gotten attached to her. Edgar said it might be because it recognized her, the one who saved it, as a friend. Sylvie said if there were parent dragons, capturing them would have been difficult, so it might be alone from the start, and now she was struggling with its food. Even though she prepared so much, it was a mess. She asked what they ate to him. Edgar asked what Dryden did about it, and she said they never fed it once from the moment it was captured. They said dragons were tough, and being weakened makes them easier to control. She really should have punched him when she had the chance. She wondered if there was anything in the food storage and opened it. The dragon quickly went inside, startling her. The food storage was enchanted with spatial magic. Not only does it hold infinite items, but it also preserves their freshness. Sylvia grabbed the dragon and got it out of there. When she managed to get it, she noticed that it was eating an apple. She was surprised because she thought dragons were carnivorous. She said she had all sorts of fruits, but the baby dragon only ate apples. She gave every single apple in the house. She then realized that it could be that it only eats apples from the dungeons. Edgar started grinning because it was rare to see her being thrown off. He said that it wasn't the dragon's fault. It couldn't help its diet. But dungeon apples were hard to come by. At least she was glad to know what it could eat. Edgar asked if she had thought of a name yet. She tried many ideas, but none felt quite right. She tried Draco, Draki, Draco, but it didn't like any of them. Edgar said those were too simple. He suggested taking something from mythology or a story. He bet the baby wanted something that sounded a bit cooler. He then suggested the name Gunyan, the one who borrowed the power of the goddess Aideen to defeat the evil demon king. She remembers reading about that in a picture book once. She called the baby dragon Gunyan, and from its reaction it seemed to have liked it. From today on, it was Gunyan. Sometime soon they would have to go gather food for Gunyan, so she asked Edgar which dungeon had apple trees. He said he would fetch the stockpile at the palace for now. Suddenly the door knocked, and they had no idea who it was, so Sylvie asked Edgar to keep an eye on Gunyan. When she opened the door, Edgar saw scary-looking people with weapons, so he was worried. But they seemed like they were friends with Sylvia. They were her friends, Therese and Gilles. They asked at the guild and came right over to see her. Therese scolded Sylvie for not sending them letters after she moved. Sylvie apologized and explained that things had been so hectic. Meanwhile, Edgar was questioning why she flicked Sylvie's forehead. Therese and Gilles saw Edgar and immediately recognized him. They asked why he was in Sylvie's house. Edgar was surprised that they recognized him. Sylvie introduced them as her adventurer comrades. Therese then asked Sylvie to go dungeon diving together. In the next scene, they sat together, and Therese and Gilles started talking about old days. She used to team up with Sylvie a lot and dive into dungeons together. They were also graduates of St. Aideen Academy. Sylvie may be younger, but her abilities were top-notch, and thanks to that, Gilles shot up to A rank in no time. Gilles asked why Prince Edgar was here. She said it was hard to explain. She mentioned to Edgar that she had already told them everything about the ducal house and the broken engagement. Prince Edgar had to explain that his brother treated Sylvia terribly and that he was truly sorry. They were shocked that he was apologizing because he was a prince. Sylvia mentioned that he was not very princely, but he was definitely someone they could trust. Prince Edgar confirmed her and asked them to treat him as a fellow adventurer. Sylvie then asked about the new dungeon. Gilles said a new dungeon had been discovered nearby, and they got a request to investigate, so they thought maybe Sylvie could come with them again. It was rare for a new dungeon to appear around here. Most had already been cleared ages ago, which means piles of treasure. And it was better with Sylvia around. Sylvie wondered if apples grew in that unexplored dungeon. Edgar asked if it ruins that turned into a dungeon. Gilles explained that it was originally a natural cave. The guild had guards at the entrance to keep people from entering without permission. Edgar then asked if he could come along too. He said he would like to experience a dungeon investigation firsthand. Besides, when else would he get the chance to join such a powerful party? And also, if it wasn't ruins that became a dungeon, there was no danger of getting cursed. They said the possibility was not zero, so they needed to make sure to get the king's permission. Sylvia asked if they would mind Edgar, but they were okay with him. With that, they were ready to head out for a dungeon investigation, but Edgar wanted to get their gear in order. Sylvie suggested that Therese use this house as his base because there were guest rooms upstairs. A few days later, Sylvia and Edgar told Gunyan to be careful when they were gone. It was the first day, so they were going to be back by evening. She told him not to go outside, and Gunyan seemed to understand her, but she was still worried. She thought about making a golem to guard the place. Edgar was surprised that she could make golems, so she said she only studied it. This would be her first time actually making one. She set a magic stone on top of a pile of earth and created 3 golems. She ordered them to protect this house and warn intruders, and if they don't leave, eliminate them. They looked kind of lame, but it was more than enough. The guild's carriage was here to pick them up, so they headed outside the garden. On their way, Silva gave everyone amulets enchanted with her substitute magic. The others in the carriage noticed that they weren't nervous at all and hoped the beginner one wouldn't cause trouble for them, the veterans. Teresa wondered who they were. Gil said they must have heard rumors about the new dungeon and told Edgar not to mind them. Sylvia approached those veterans and stated that Edgar was a scholar and that he researched dungeon formation, so the guild asked him to join them. He was also a graduate of St. Aideen Academy, so he was licensed as an adventurer. When they arrived, they noticed that the entrance was tiny. Edgar said they were going to register over there before entering and then noticed that Sylvia was doing something. They made a teleportation circle. This way, the trip back would be easier. After registration was done, they entered the dungeon. Sylvia hated those dump dungeons. She used Terra to lighten up. Now Terra could go ahead and check things out for them. Normally, they would use detection magic to scout as they go, but asking spirits was much faster. But only someone like Sylvie with endless mana could do this. It looked like it got pretty wide further in. Terra said she would draw the map. The adventurers used to painstakingly make dungeon maps like this. These sell for a good price at the guild, too. They arrived at the first path that split into two, and Terra asked which direction they were going. It seemed like more adventurers went left, so Gil wanted to take the right. Sylvia reminded Edgar to always keep an escape route in mind because you never know what strong monsters might appear. A group of goblins was spotted and Terra started the attack with the first strike of Fireball. After that, Gil joined her and started slashing them. He even turned to Edgar and told him not to rush to the front. Terra asked Sylvie to save her strength too. Edgar found them amazing, but Sylvie said goblins were not strong enemies. Edgar wanted to handle a few too. Gil let one run towards him and he slashed the goblin with one move. Sylvie was not worried about Edgar at all because he was already a reliable adventurer. In the next scene, they went outside the dungeon and ate lunch. Sylvie brought it all into her storage magic. Normally, they would have to choke down nasty preserved rations. This was fancier than their usual meals. Sylvie went all out since it had been so long since they all adventured together. Suddenly, she noticed an apple tree. She was so happy to find food for Gunyan. The others told her to wait until they finished eating. Though this was still just near the entrance, it seemed like a pretty average dungeon with low-level monsters. In the evening, they returned home and encountered Gunyan, but he made a huge mess in the house. In the next scene, Sylvie finished making a cheese omelet and called Terrace and Gil for breakfast. They were going to explore the dungeon again today. Prince Edgar was also there and greeted them. They were surprised to see him here early, but they actually overslept. By the way, Edgar owned a separate residence as the Lord and commutes from here. Tella said that if they work hard today, tomorrow would be a rest day. They were currently in the middle of investigating a newly discovered dungeon. Normally, once you enter a dungeon, you camp out and continue exploring for days. Thanks to her teleportation array, they could do day trips and enjoy a 2-day off-per-week dungeon schedule. The map had been updated and it looked like plenty of other adventurers were in here besides them. Word had spread that it was a manageable mid-level dungeon. Since they realized it was too early to leave Gunyan at home, they had been bringing him along. Edgar asked Gunyan to behave again today. He had gotten really attached to him. When they heard a sound, Edgar hid Gunyan. It was training time. Sylvie asked Edgar what the traits of grass slimes were. He said physical attacks don't work well and they were poisonous, so swords were no good, but they were weak to fire, so with his attribute, he took them all down with a lightning slash. Sylvie was so proud of him for taking care of those unpleasant slimes. She hated slimy things. Tella said he was leveling up fast in this dungeon, and if he took the exam, he could easily make B rank. Edgar was grateful to have such reliable party members. It was really a well-balanced dungeon for training, and it looked like the substitute amulets she made wouldn't even be needed. Today's lunch was seafood doria, grilled salmon meuniere, fried oysters, and an all-seafood feast. The menu was the total opposite of a cave. Tellus felt like they were cheating while eating that delicious food. But Sylvie wanted a more comfortable dungeon experience, and that was all. Apparently, she had always hated camping. They first met Sylvie through a guild introduction 3 years ago. The guildmaster said he would be joining this time too, and asked them to take him along for the exploration. They weren't sure about her at first, but Sylvie was shockingly experienced for a newbie adventurer. But after about 2 weeks of continuous exploration, she couldn't take it anymore. She didn't want to sleep in a place like this and decided to go home to sleep in her bed. They were shocked and confused, but Sylvie made a teleportation circle and brought everyone to her house. Her mother was surprised to see her early and with her friends. That was when they learned that she was the Duke's daughter. Edgar seemed pleased that Sylvie had times like that too, and she would say she was thrown into dungeons at age 10. Sylvie told him that it had always been day trips up until then. 2 weeks of sleeping on hard ground would stress anyone out. Eating good food and having a comfortable exploration, Gil wanted to be adopted into Sylvie's family. Tellus said that would be good, but Sylvie already had one big kid, Edgar, and one creature at home. Both Edgar and Gunyan were offended. Tellus suggested that Edgar move into Sylvie's house because he was coming every morning anyway. After lunch, they continued exploring and found another apple tree. Gunyan was so happy, but Sylvie told him not to overeat because they were harvesting these to bring back. Tellus wondered if little Gunyan eats nothing but apples. She didn't think so, but if he kept growing, apples alone wouldn't be enough nutrition. Both dragons and dungeons were still being researched, full of mysteries, but they needed to keep observing carefully. Edgar noticed that radishes were growing behind the trees. This reminded him of the time of her radish declaration at the graduation party. Edgar told her that she didn't have to push herself and assumed going to the royal palace would be difficult. He said he could deliver them to the palace instead. Right now, they haven't even requested a harvest. Sylvie declined because the palace can't exactly issue a request to her anymore anyway. It was true that she would feel uneasy going back to the palace and appreciated Edgar's consideration, but still, she couldn't help but wonder what the royal court thinks of Edgar coming here every single day. His rampage before was caused by the curse. She didn't want his standing to worsen just from being associated with her. If she asks herself whether she was truly blameless in the whole affair, starting with the broken engagement, the answer wasn't so simple. She thought things could have turned out better if she had acted differently. The fact that Prince Christopher's condition never improved, even though Edgar told her not to worry about it, still concerned Sylvie. Back then, she refused to get involved. The broken engagement inevitably led either to execution or to becoming the last boss to be defeated. The future awaiting Silviana Mercolini inside the game was always dark. So, as a reincarnator, all she thought about was saving herself. She played the perfect Duke's daughter to avoid the execution route. She smoothed out the engagement annulment. Behind the scenes, she built up power and funds, so she could enjoy a third life. She abandoned Prince Christopher for her own desires, and as a result, the calamity meant for her might have shifted onto Prince Christopher instead. She wondered if she was overthinking it, but if Edgar also suffers just for being involved with her, she will feel really guilty. Maybe the reason she had started to feel that way was that these days were unexpectedly fun. In the next scene, they were on their rest day, so Therese told Sylvie that she was going to cook so Sylvie could rest. Gil asked if Edgar was here, and she said he was in the next room doing paperwork. Gil noticed the letter she was holding. She said it was a summons from the royal palace. It says, "Come to receive word regarding the marriage alliance between the Birnium royal family and the Mercolini ducal house." It might be because the investigation into the annulment was done and Prince Christopher's sentence had been decided and they wanted her to be there to witness it. Gil said they would skip the dungeon and go. He asked if Edgar had told her about it, but he didn't. Edgar was dragged by Gunyan to the living room. Sylvie showed him the letter and asked if he knew anything about this. He said he hadn't heard a word. If it was about his brother's punishment, Sylvie, she shouldn't have needed to be there anymore. But she couldn't just ignore the summons, so she decided to go as his former fiancé. Sylvie found it strange that Edgar didn't know about this. She then realized that it might just be about the annulment with the prince. In the next scene, Sylvie wore a quite plain dress to go to the palace. Sylvie explained to her mother that it was a summons from the royal palace after her engagement annulment, so if she showed up in a bright and battle dress, it would be sarcastic. Her father said it was better to show them how well she was living now. It was time for her to head now. Just in case, her father told her to strengthen the house's defenses. He only hoped it didn't turn into a dispute. After all the insults the royal family had dealt with his daughter, he had not forgiven them. If they dared to spout any more nonsense, they would be pretty mad. This atmosphere didn't feel ordinary after all. At lightest, Prince Christopher would receive a set period of house arrest, and at harshest, he might be stripped of his right to the throne as punishment. If that happens, succession rights would pass to the second prince, Edgar, and if so, the most likely outcome was a marriage between Sylvie and Edgar. Of course, there was no more convenient bride than a duke's daughter already trained in queenly duties. They were the same age and they already knew each other. She thought about this possibility in the carriage and how their life would be at the farm. In the next scene, Sylvie arrived at the palace and greeted the king. It was the first time she had come to the palace since that day of condemnation. She heard the rumors about Prince Christopher, but he really looked terrible. Edgar was also there. The king said he was glad she had come. First, he talked about Christopher's punishment. Leaving aside the annulment, this man had shown far too much foolish behavior. He led unlicensed students into dangerous dungeons. He was cursed and spread it to those around him. This was a grave incident that threatened the very foundation of the palace, so he was going to face strict punishment. Christopher was stripped of succession rights and exiled to a provincial domain. His succession rights would be transferred to the second prince, Edgar. That was a harsher sentence than Sylvie thought. She thought he might at least remain in the palace, even if stripped of succession. Losing rank and hiding away in the frontier, in a way, that looked a lot like her own situation now. but choosing to step away and being forced into exile were completely different. As far as she was concerned, she had already returned the favor that day, and she had received plenty of compensation money, so she didn't wish to punish him further. The king then stated that the royal family would like to secure the next king's position. With that being said, the king proposed marriage to Prince Edgar, the second prince of Berenium. Before he could finish his sentence, Edgar interrupted and asked his father not to say such reckless things. He had heard about succession rights, but to think it would come to this was not something he expected. Sylvie confirmed that Edgar really didn't know about this. He asked if that was the reason he was ordered to attend this meeting, because if he told him beforehand he would have argued. But if the king issues the order here first, it leaves a record in the time crystal. As for succession, he didn't object and humbly accepted it. However, it was not right to drag Lady Sylviana into this. He asked him to reflect on how the royal family had treated her. Bound as his brother's fiancée, forced to work as an adventurer only to end in annulment, and now another marriage proposal was too disrespectful. She went to her farm intending to supervise her, but instead he was the one who learned a lesson. The way she lives unrestrained, that power of hers that even strengthens those around her, must never be suppressed by anyone. Sylvie was shocked and glad that Edgar stepped out for her. She giggled and told Prince Edgar that the king never once used the word marriage. It was true that Prince Edgar had helped her with farming. It was labor in place of compensation for the annulment. But now he was an important friend. Marriage was nonsense, and she assumed what the king meant was to continue being good friends from here on. The king was about to clarify her, but then Sylvie's parents stepped up and said they should pretend they didn't hear those words, and as her parents they only wished to respect their daughter's feelings to the fullest. The king still tried to use the M word, but Sylvie's father approached him and stated that if he kept disregarding her daughter like this, he might just usurp the throne himself. Her mother then said that if making Sylvie unhappy was the alternative, that would be faster. Prince Edgar apologized on his father's behalf for his rude words and asked if he could release him. Duke was fine with that and said taking over the royal family would only be troublesome. After that, they take their leave for today. Sylvie was so happy that Edgar understood her feelings. She didn't want to lose the slow life, the freedom she finally gained. Neither her past dreams nor her ambitions in this one had been fulfilled at all. Walking back home, Sylvie mentioned that it was her father who said they shouldn't stir up the trouble. She appreciated that they were angry on her behalf, but they were both far too overpowering when they doted on her. That can't be helped though, because her happiness mattered the most to them. But her father mentioned that Prince Edgar had quite a backbone. When he opposed his father, the king so openly and stepped in without hesitation to mediate with him was impressive. He asked if she thought Prince Edgar could be trusted, and she confirmed her father. They then questioned if he really goes to her farm that often without permission. Sylvie clarified that they were just friends. Sylvie mentioned that Prince Christopher's punishment felt too harsh. It was left unsaid earlier, but apparently many other problems were discovered too, that Sylvie didn't know about. Those were embezzlement from the treasury, assault on subordinate nobles, and the use of banned substances. They said that if he made himself and his companions take them before entering dungeons, and on top of that to secure Katya's position, he schemed to arrange an adoption into a noble house. When rejected, he sent thugs after them. Hiding behind the curse excuse was not enough, and he should be glad he wasn't thrown in prison. Sylvie had no idea that things had gotten that bad and felt guilty for not paying more attention. Suddenly, she felt something behind her and told her parents to go home first. They were uneasy, but she said she would be fine and she only needed to talk. There was no point dwelling on it forever, so she wanted to settle this with Prince Christopher. In her previous life, Sylvie should have been working hard every day for her dream, but before she knew it, all she could do was stare blankly at her phone. And she thought there was something nice about Prince Christopher. That was how they truly first met. After she sent her parents, Prince Christopher started by blaming everything on Sylvie. She calmly asked what her fault was. He claimed that his reputation was ruined by the humiliation he suffered at that graduation ceremony. She had always looked down on him, and it was because of her that he ended up in this mess. Sylvie couldn't believe he was just shifting the blame. She said she merely stated the truth and asked if he didn't drown himself in Yura's affection for Lady Katya all on his own. Prince Christopher was sure she was always looking down on him from on high like that. She was nothing like the kind-hearted Katya, and she was a cold, devilish woman to him. Sylvie realized that to the prince she really was the villainess. She didn't think it served him right or anything, but it was true. All she thought about was protecting herself. Prince Christopher had been disinherited from the royal family, and Katya still couldn't leave the temple. He said they were ruined because of her. As he threw his fist at her, she stopped him with her one hand. She said he might be right. If she hadn't let go of His Highness's hand, things might have turned out differently. If she had, they could each have happiness on their own separate paths. Prince called her a monster just for being stronger than him. She responded that she wasn't even using magic right now, and this was just her bare hands. It was he who was weak. She grabbed his arm and threw him to the ground with one hand. She told him that as the prince, he could have defeated the villain if he had just put in an honest effort. To claim he became unhappy simply because she was no longer taking care of him was a bit too much like a spoiled child. However, if she could turn back time, she would tell him that as long as he strives to be a good royal, she would pledge her lifelong loyalty to be his support, no matter what form that may take. After all, her past self thought that Christopher, so devoted to the main character, was wonderful. The guards came and saw the prince on the ground and were about to question Sylvie, but Prince Edgar came and said he would take it from here while they helped his brother rest in his room. He asked Sylvie if she was okay and he was so confused. Prince Christopher heard him calling her Sylvie and asked if they were close enough to use nicknames. He bet they were connected back in their student days. He asked if they had plotted together to bring him down. Edgar told him that they confirmed her innocence with the crystal time. Christopher had gone berserk and started asking if he was satisfied now that he had taken everything from him. They took him away from them, and Edgar once again apologized on his brother's behalf. Sylvie didn't think there was a need for him to apologize because he had already bowed his head in place of the king just moments ago. He couldn't believe the king would suggest such a thing and apologized again for having her go through that. She responded that the marriage proposal was a rational idea. Normally, the ducal house should have gladly accepted, but she claimed it was because of her own selfishness. Edgar flinched her forehead and asked her to tell him how she really felt. She couldn't believe she couldn't dodge an attack from him. She said she understood the reasoning behind the proposal, but she still wanted her slow life, so she refused. And while she was at it, she said she didn't see what was so wrong with being selfish. She feels sorry for Prince Christopher, and she knows she caused trouble for the royal family. Edgar told her that the royal family was the one tying her down all this time, and it was only natural she wouldn't want to get engaged. Right now, the farm was important to her, and she just didn't have the capacity to think about that yet. So it wasn't that she disliked him or anything like that. She thanked him for it earlier and said she was happy that he understood how she felt. He was happy she called him her friend, and they shook hands. Sylvie then asked if he had heard about Katya not being able to leave the temple. He said she was the one most deeply affected by the curse, so she had been admitted to the temple to continue her purification. Once she recovered, she was set to work at the temple as a magic user. Lady Katya was admitted to the academy in the first place because her talent for healing magic was recognized. They were apparently making sure she had no contact with his brother. Katya was also under the curse's influence back then, and she was sure she too should have had a happy ending as the game's heroine. Katya didn't commit a crime like the prince did, so it felt like a reasonable outcome. Edgar asked if she was going into the dungeon again tomorrow. She said yes, and asked if he would be able to come too. He said the actual succession to the throne was still a long way off. After that, they said goodbye to each other, and Sylvie left. Meanwhile, Prince Christopher was in his room, freaking out. He was repeating to himself that he was going to crush every person who made a fool of him, such as his insolent younger brother, who snatched away their incompetent father's throne, and Mercarini. When he first met her, he still remembers thinking what a beautiful girl she was. He thought she was the finest work of art created by the gods, and at the same time an overwhelming sense of defeat. He couldn't win against Silviana. That was how powerful her presence was, and those large eyes stared straight at him. She was sizing him up, seeing him for the person he was, the heir to the throne, yet not particularly capable. As she grew, her eyes grew colder, and he became ruled by the fear that she might one day take over the royal family. It was then that a goddess-like being appeared before him. Katya came from his window. She was so happy to be able to find him. Shocked, Prince Christopher asked why she was here, and she said she wanted to see him, so she snuck out of the temple. Prince was so happy that she wanted to see him. Katya grabbed his face and said she wanted to help him, but she didn't have the power, so she had an idea. She bet there was a magic book in the royal library that could break the curse and wanted to go look for it. He listened to her, and they went to the library. She found a book and gave it to him. She said a kind and wise man like him could surely succeed. Christopher seemed interested in the book either. She gave him a good luck charm from her and asked him to come for her soon. After she disappeared, Prince Christopher promised himself to come for her. In the next scene, Edgar was asking his father not to arrange those marriages on his own. It was disrespectful to her and to the House Marcolini. The king, however, said the right of succession had shifted from Christopher to him, and it was something they must consider. He deliberately kept him unbothered in preparation for a situation like this, and it would be a shame to lose their ties with House Mercolini at this stage. Their pedigree was exceptional, and their political acumen was top class. A marriage alliance was the best way to absorb a family that, at times, wields even more power than the crown. Edgar told him that he was talking about the matter of personal trust. The Duke and the Duchess's faith in the royal family had hit rock bottom, and at this rate it wouldn't be surprising if they staged a takeover. Even the king agreed that today was frightening. Edgar said he would be the one taking Silviana. She was so kind that she couldn't say no when asked and skilled enough to handle anything thrown at her. Just the other day, she was expressing concern about her grandfather's health. She might not have looked at it, but she was actually a very good person. If someone isn't by her side, watching over her, he is afraid she will push herself past her limit. Edgar didn't want to burden her any further. His father and his grandfather may think they could bind her with royal decrees, but in truth, they were merely taking advantage of the Mercolini family's goodwill. With her power as an S-rank adventurer, it wouldn't be impossible for her to destroy this entire country. The only reason she didn't sever her ties with the royal family was surely due to her pride and sense of duty as the daughter of a duke. They too should treat her with respect as an equal. The king noticed that Prince Edgar held her in very high regard and said he was better suited for this than Christopher. He never seemed to care for her. Edgar told him that he was being serious. The king admitted that they had been terribly disrespectful to her. He said he understood now and let him handle this as he wished. After thanking his father for understanding, he left the room. The marriage proposal had only been postponed, so Edgar was sure it would come up again. Sylvie called him her friend, but that alone didn't mean the royal family's trust had been restored. First, he needs to change the way people think at the royal palace. He needs to become stronger too. He wasn't saying he expected to stand on her level, but when the time came, he wanted to be strong enough to watch her back. Several days had passed since her break with Prince Christopher. They had resumed exploring the dungeon, and everything was completely back to the way it was, or so she thought. The area they were in was nothing but puddles. Jill asked if she could use a cleansing spell to get clean. She said she was going to, and he didn't have to tell her. She seemed kind of ticked off, so Terrace asked if she was fine. Edgar told her that if she was tired, she shouldn't force it and let them know about it. Even on rest days, she was always busy with the farm or preparing food. Sylvie said she was okay and thanked him. She was thinking how busy Edgar was, juggling his public duties. He was trying to be nice, and she was so curt with him that she felt bad. Therese noticed that she was looking down and asked if something had happened to Edgar at the royal palace. She panicked and said nothing happened. She said that for some reason she feels strangely unsettled. It was like this dark emotion inside her was about to burst out, like she wanted to go on a wild rampage. Ever since the incident at the royal palace, she had sorted things out with the prince, but it felt like she had been forced to face the reality that she was a villainess all over again. She then realized that that wasn't a very nice thing to say and apologized. But Therese said everyone feels that way sometimes. Even she completely loses it when Zeal drinks too much and wastes all their travel money. But if Sylvie were to truly lose her reason, it would be a disaster. Edgar said it would be alright and reminded her that he would pull her back before that happened. Gil and the others came and hugged them because they were almost at the deepest level of this dungeon, and once they cleared it, they were going to party hard. About 1 month after the dungeon's discovery, by sharing information with other adventurers as they explored, they had concluded that this was an intermediate-level dungeon without any especially powerful monsters. All that remained was to see who would be the first to reach the boss's room at the lowest level. Boss rooms exist at the deepest level of the dungeon. If the boss within was defeated, the dungeon was considered clear and would cease to grow any further. Apparently they were the first ones here, so they would double the reward. With a dungeon at this level, Gil claimed that the boss battle should be a breeze. That was a relief for a novice like Edgar. Sylvie warned everyone not to get careless and go in cautiously. The three of them would scout ahead, so she told Edgar and Gunyan to wait back here. When Sylvie opened the door, she was stunned. She heard the voice of her older sister. At that moment, she started recalling when she was first reincarnated. She was so upset because she didn't want to die yet. The inner thoughts in her Villainess's life hit her like a slap in the face. She didn't want to think about things like this. The voices in her head were driving her crazy. She started sweating and trembling. When she screamed for it to stop, everyone was shocked. Sylvie told everyone that they were pulling out. They were confused because it was just a regular beast-type monster. She was the only one who felt this ominous magical energy. The voice told her that she had gotten so used to suppressing her own feelings, and reminded her that she was the villainess, so she should just act like one. She said she wasn't a villain, but the voice claimed she wanted to unleash her true power. As she was about to get manipulated by that voice, Edgar pulled her out of that hole and told the others to fall back. They got out of the boss's room and closed the door. Puzzled, Therese asked what this was about. Edgar responded that something was wrong with Sylvie, but that monster didn't seem tough at all, so they were questioning if retreating was the right choice. Sylvie asked if they saw a huge shadow, but they didn't. Edgar was worried. Sylvie started shaking again and she said there was no way she could beat it. They were shocked that Sylvie said she can't win against that boss because it was just a regular best type of monster, and she had beaten tons of those before. Sylvie asked if any of them had heard the voice and that horrible presence. Gilles said he didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. Edgar was watching from outside and didn't sense anything wrong. But while Therese and Gilles were getting ready to fight, Sylvie was the only one frozen solid, so he figured something was off and brought her out. Gilles laughed it out and reminded her that she was an S-rank adventurer. Sylvie got mad and told him that she didn't care if she was S rank. If she thinks she can't win, she is going to be scared. Gil was confused because there weren't many enemies she couldn't defeat. She used to think so too, but that thing was not just some monster. It was radiating some kind of immeasurable, terrifying, magical power. For now, she decided to seal this door so it couldn't be opened from the outside or the inside. Jill was upset because they were the first ones to get here. Edgar thought dungeon bosses usually stay put. They were usually, but they didn't know what could happen. She never had to seal a boss's room before, so she was nervous, but she succeeded. She then decided to seal the entire dungeon itself. She was getting every adventurer currently inside out of here. Jill was shocked and said this was overkill. Luckily, the survey was almost finished and they shouldn't push their luck any further. They would discuss their next move with the guild. He still couldn't believe that they had to go that far. But Talise told him that they should follow Sylvie's lead on his because this kind of gut feeling was what kept adventurers alive. Sylvie had no proof, but she absolutely felt some horrifying. She wondered if it was because of her being the villainess with memories of her past life. In the next scene, they gathered everyone inside the dungeon and sealed the dungeon. The guildmaster was glad everyone was safe. Teleporting dozens of adventurers at once was not unheard of, but she really showed them a superhuman amount of magical power. The master then asked if there was a monster even Sylvie couldn't beat. Gil said it didn't look that tough on them. Talise stated that she seemed a little off lately. Maybe she was just on the edge, and she might be able to beat it if she gets some rest. Sylvie tried to explain herself but realized that she couldn't tell them the truth. All she had to go on with was a feeling. It wasn't like she could just say it was her intuition as a reincarnated person. She wondered how she could explain this in a way they would believe. Edgar noticed that Sylvie was in a tough situation, so he said she really was not herself back there. Getting scared, raising her voice, freezing up in a daze, that was not like her at all. He was sure this was no small matter. Edgar asked her to tell them exactly what she saw. She said that thing was targeting only her. The beast-type boss monster that they all saw certainly wasn't an opponent they would have had trouble with. But behind it, it was more like it was covering the entire room. There was a black evil shadow clinging to it, and that was what tried to invade her mind. That black shadow precisely targeted the weakest parts of her soul. The sorrow and rage she had averted her eyes from, memories she didn't want to recall, all came flooding into her head at once, and her mind was a total mess. The negative feelings she had sealed away were about to be peeled back by force. In that instant, that voice asked her if she didn't want to try using her true power as much as she liked. Worried, Edgar said she didn't have to say anything she didn't want to. She thanked Edgar and Gunyan, but she had to tell them all this. She said that she was on the verge of being swallowed by that monster. If things had kept going, she would have been manipulated however it wanted. Jill and Therese started to realize the seriousness of this situation. She said she would become the world's greatest enemy if they didn't pull her out of here. Everyone was too stunned to speak. This was the scenario where the villainous Sliviana turns into the final boss, just like in the World of Love dungeon. She never knew what conditions would trigger her transformation into the final boss, so having her mind taken over by a monster was one of the worst ways. The guildmaster knew it would have been irreversible if that had happened. Jill was so glad she avoided it and apologized for complaining. Therese wondered why she was the target, and the guildmaster figured it was because she was the strongest. He had heard of cases where monsters take over humans, like Kelpie, a water demon, dominating someone with a water affinity, but that was all stuff from hundreds of years ago. Monsters these days don't have the intelligence to control people, especially not a magic user on Sylvie's level, and yet that thing targeted Sylvie. Edgar figured that it must be a special kind of monster and asked if she had any idea why she was targeted. There were plenty of reasons, but she could only say it was because she was strong. But Therese and Gil went in first, and they were both incredibly strong, yet it completely ignored them. So that means it wasn't just after anyone strong. It was probably targeting Silviana Melcalini from the very start. In any case, she didn't know what would happen the next time she faced that monster. But that didn't mean they could just leave it alone. Gil suggested the rest of them take down the boss. But if its host body was gone, the Black Shadow might be released into the outside world so they couldn't act carelessly. Sylvie didn't know how long the seal on that room would last. She wasn't used to it, and her mind wasn't stable when she cast it. If that seal were to break, the backlash would cause a massive stampede. Sylvie felt so much fear and powerlessness the moment she faced an enemy she couldn't possibly beat. She didn't want to become the final boss of this game. Edgar put his hand on her shoulder to support and said it was all right. He reminded her that she was still Sylvie. He then told the master that even if it was hundreds of years ago, there had to be similar cases and records of them. It wouldn't be easy to find, but the master said he would have the entire guild get on it. Edgar also decided to ask the neighboring count to lend a hand with reinforcing security. Gil and Therese said they would camp out near the dungeon and keep watch to make sure the seal didn't break. Thanks to Sylvie's level-headed handling of the situation, no one was hurt and they could prepare a solid counterplan. Edgar reminded Sylvie that she wasn't alone, and she could rely on her comrades every once in a while. Sylvie was so happy to have those people around her and regained her confidence. She thanked them and promised not to let herself be swallowed up that easily. There was no way in hell she was letting them steal the slow life she finally obtained.